It comes from the Los Angeles Times, a commentary piece written by Brady McCullough. And his premise is the SEC is the conference that came out the biggest loser in not expanding the college football playoff to 12 games. He writes, for too long, the Pac-12 has served as an almost willing national punching bag. During the weekend, as passionate college football observers processed the news that the college football playoff would not expand before the 2026 season, it was only natural the sports opinion shapers assigned the proverbial clown suit to the West Coast Power 5 Conference. He says some of the criticism is fair, some of it isn't, but before we get stuck in the same old pattern of picking on the Pac-12, how about we pose a different question? What if the biggest loser in the failure to expand the CFP was the conference with the most to gain? The one that had been pulling the strings harder than any other the last 2+ years to push the number to 12. He does right now, as a disclaimer, I believe college football would be, expansion would be great for college football. And of course, it would very much benefit the Pac-12 to have more teams invited to the event. Parenthetically, he should have put to have any teams invited to the event. The point I'm about to make is that agreeing to it today, given how the process played out the last 6 months, would have only increased the SEC's position of dominance over the rest of the Power 5, even the cash-flush Big Ten. There's a lot to read, a lot more there. He goes back and blames Texas and Oklahoma, talked about the fact that Greg Sankey, he believes, went out of his way to convince Texas and Oklahoma that a 12-team playoff was coming. You know, the only thing that he wrote on there that I kind of agree with, like there was very little in the entire column that I thought made even a modicum of sense, and I had we are all dumber for having heard what came out of your mouth, and may God have mercy on your soul. I mean, that was kind of rolling around the back of my head, but he did point out, what if the brass at Texas A&M had not leaked the fact that Oklahoma and Texas were coming to the Houston Chronicle and Brent Zwerneman so that the story got out there and the SEC had to pre-play its big flop, and ultimately Texas and Oklahoma had kept that deal quiet long enough to get the 12-team deal ratified. Is it ultimately Ross Bjork's fault that we don't have a 12-team playoff?
I don't know if it is or not, but let's blame him anyway. I don't think anybody in this state will have a problem with it.
The thing is, there's some truth to what I read the whole thing, thought about it a lot, as much as I could today. There is some truth to what he's saying, because Greg Sankey did lose in this, technically. He was part of the group that wrote the proposal for expansion, wanted it, voted for it, didn't get it. So technically, if you want something, you propose it, and that proposal is rejected, you did lose. You had effort, a couple years' worth of effort, extending an olive branch, whatever you want to call it, and you didn't get your way. That is technically losing. But Southern Cal better not lose at Utah in October, because the Pac-12 will then lose again, because they won't get a team in the playoff again. And you can guarantee an SEC team will be in the playoff again.
Again, I'm about to say, yeah, throw that in.
So, yeah, Greg Sankey may have lost in this negotiation, but his league didn't. The same league that's getting more teams in the playoff, that's winning more championships, that's getting more money, that is somehow immune compared to the rest of the country in attendance losses. And by the way, games rate extremely well around here for his league. Ohio State, Michigan beat the SEC. Sure, it did. Michigan State had a really good number. Sure, it did. But the SEC had more games watched by more people than anybody else in the country. So, yeah, maybe he's a loser today, but then we're going to kick the ball off. And then he won't be a loser anymore.
Do you believe that all along Greg Sankey was really not being altruistic? He was not setting aside what was solely best for the SEC. He was actually scheming behind the scenes to make it look like he was doing what was good for college football as a whole, when in reality, he was just trying to make it better for the SEC? Or do you believe that, as we've talked about and kind of given him credit for, the SEC was fine and will be fine in whatever playoff format exists, but Greg Sankey, deep down, believes that college football needs to be stronger nationally for the SEC to kind of maintain its stranglehold? I don't think Greg Sankey and the working group would have put forth a proposal that was going to be intentionally detrimental to the Southeastern Conference. But if you believe the SEC is going to be fine in whatever the format, is it a stretch to say that Greg Sankey and Craig Thompson and Jack Swarbrick and Bob Bowlesby were trying to do what was best for college football as a whole?
You've seen A Beautiful Mind?
Yeah.
What is it he says in there? That everything is best when you do what's best for the individual and best for the group at the same time? That's kind of what this is, right? Greg Sankey doing what's best for college football, but it definitely benefits his conference, maybe more than anybody else. So you can have, what's the word you use, altruistic motives and selfish motives at the same time.
Here's the thing this is what I was thinking about the most today. What could college football do that wouldn't benefit the SEC?
Kick the SEC out of college
But seriously,
football.
What can be done in college football where the SEC would not be the best at it? What can we do? 2-team playoff. BCS, the SEC was the best at it. 4-team, the SEC is the best at it. NIL, the SEC is the best at it. Transfer portal, the SEC is the best at it. Why? Because they have the best coaches, the most money, and the fans that care the most. And as long as that is the thing, it doesn't matter what people do. It doesn't matter what you vote for. It doesn't matter what the playoff structure is. It doesn't matter what the NCAA does, because as long as those facts remain true, the best players in the country come from the Southeast. The most money is here, generally speaking. I know the Big Ten's got a big fat TV deal. Great for them. But the best players generally come from here. We got the most money, the most care. It is ingrained in the culture here more than it is any other region of the country where these conferences exist. As long as that is the case, nothing matters. Nothing you do matters. Because losing is acceptable elsewhere. And football on Saturday is just kind of a fun thing to do. Here, people work to pay for football here. It's pay the bills and get me to the game. You've got NFL fan bases scattered all over the country like that. But not college, not like this to the scale that it is. So as long as that remains, nothing else matters.
The argument that the SEC had the most to lose rings hollow for me. Did the SEC perhaps have the most to gain by getting, instead of 2, 3 or 4 teams in the college playoff on an annual basis? In a down year, 3? In a crazy elite year, maybe they get 5? Yeah, I mean, I can sign on board with that, but how can you say the SEC had the most to lose when the Pac-12 has not had a team in the playoff in 6 years? when the ACC did not have a representative in the playoff this year and it wasn't close. When the Big Ten has had a couple of seasons where they didn't have a playoff participant. When the Big 12 has had that issue. The SEC is the only conference that hasn't had that issue at all. So, yeah, I can maybe get on board with the idea that the SEC had the most to gain because their participation number would go up in all likelihood. But to say they've got the most to lose, that doesn't make sense, or that they lost the most. That doesn't make sense to me when you have conferences consistently not getting in the tournament at all.